Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Derwin, and I'm here with Shane Buell. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the huge earthquakes that hit Myanmar and Thailand last week. And we're also going to be discussing this idea of using earthquakes as a weapon. When I heard about the details of this earthquake, it made me think of those earthquakes that hit Turkey in February of 23. I believe it started out with the initial 7.8, and then it was followed up 11 minutes later with a 6.5, and then many tens of thousands of aftershocks followed. And I had a discussion with someone, and I can't remember who that person was, but he was kind of explaining that he thought that was retaliation for some sort of political, I guess, dispute. I don't know if it could have been Turkey's support for Palestine, although this was before the war officially broke out, or it could have been the invasion that Turkey did into Kurdish territory, and the U.S. were backing the Kurds. The Kurds are a pretty big ethnic group who has never, or I guess for a long time, has not had their own country, and they've been fighting for their independence for many, many years. I don't remember what it was, but they were pretty confident that that was what was behind those Turkey earthquakes. But I'm going to give some background information for those of you who are not familiar with the technology that is in the South Pole that can generate earthquakes. And I did an interview with a whistleblower. His name is Eric Hecker. He worked for Raytheon Polar Services in Antarctica in 2011. I'll play some clips of that. Well, one of them is going to be from his press conference he did a few years ago, and then some are from the interview that we did with him last year. So this is Eric Hecker.
The season that I was there, 2010 to 2011, we converted from construction to operations and maintenance in both the elevated station and the detector array. Unfortunately, when they first fired it up, that was when we had the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There was 2 incidental shots before they were able to target it correctly. This is an earthquake generating device as well. This is the weapons of war that we have to deal with now and what Raytheon's hiding.
All right, so he was privy to this technology, and I'll play some more clips here of how he was able to witness these things. Here's another one. How did you get access to these technologies, and what did you see there when you were down at the South Pole Station?
Access came through being the responsible set of hands to maintaining that all of these systems were up and running. Most people don't want to believe that it's that simple, but it really is. The facility was not under any security classification. It was presented as a science facility. There was nothing that we were being told at face value was super secret, so therefore no NDAs needed to be signed. Everything was happening under false pretenses, which is extremely common for compartmentalization of information. And the folks that happen to be near these unacknowledged secret access programs are very familiar with how these systems function in broad daylight, but under false pretenses. And this is exactly what was going on.
So by you mean, for false pretenses, you mean that they hired you to be a contractor for the National Science Foundation, thinking that they were doing research for the sake of science and humanity. Is that
absolutely
kind of what people are there? And for the most part, is that what most of the scientists and employees of that area think that they're working on?
Absolutely.
All right, so that was a little clip, and I'll link the full video in the description and also put it at the end screen. And here's a little more of our interview with Eric Hecker. For some people who don't know about the New Zealand, the Christchurch, I think there were 2 earthquakes sent, and you were at the center when that happened. How were you privy to that information? That was
information I came to years later through having conversations with coworkers who were present at the time as well, and knew more than me at that time, and then read me into it years later. Almost, I guess you would say, like a confession.
Right. And they said it was an accident when they first fired up the equipment, or did you hear?
That's what I was told specifically, was that it was accidental. That part, in actuality, everybody always says that there's, whenever the government tries to put out information, they wrap it up with, a whole bunch of truth sandwiched in between two lies, and so on and so forth. So I've done a lot of filtering through what people have given me for information, and I am only putting out what I do believe to be true through research and connecting the dots. But I do believe there is a possibility that was the part that they were lying to me about, was that it was an accident. And there's other indications to me that I'm learning about since then that lead me to believe there's a possibility that there might have been intention.
Okay, and here's one last one where he discusses the technology that they have in the South Pole Station. The thing that really shook my life paradigm is this technology, these DOMs that are in the ice that, according to you, can cause earthquakes. Can you explain a little bit about what you saw and how that technology causes earthquakes?
Sure. Technically, we just have to kind of wrap our heads around the fact that this technology is very easy to accomplish, as we were told by Nikola Tesla, almost 100 years ago, and that so many whistleblowers since then, like Tom Bearden, have gotten into the technology and explained that it's just transmission of energy. This is something that can be done. We can observe it in Mother Nature, that a lightning bolt is the massive movement of energy from one location to another. It can be done. Nikola Tesla, Victor Schauberger, all these, brilliant minds of the past basically said, if we pay attention to the harmonious activity of Mother Nature amongst itself and her energies, all we have to do is create machines that function in the same way of manufacturing similar harmony, and we can harness all kinds of energy. And now we just are learning that people have been doing this for decades, with the tax dollars of the nation states, of the people that live there. They've been investing in research and development to make these semi-fantastical machines, so it would seem, but now they're using them against us because they're rogue factions that are utilizing technology. If we don't know exists, then we don't get to regulate it, so they can do whatever they want with it. Just under that simple pretext, people need to consider that if people have high technology in their hands that the rest of us don't know about, then that means it's unregulated and they can do whatever they want with it.
All right. So, I'm fully on board with the fact that this technology exists and it's being used, and it's probably not in the hands of good people. So this is a new, I guess, form of geoengineering that we haven't really gone into, but I do think it's very important. And I'm going to let Shane go into the technicalities and, the bigger picture of earthquakes, and specifically hone in on the one that happened last week.
All right. Thanks, Tracy. So yeah, you've probably heard by now about the earthquake in Myanmar, which actually also affected Bangkok, Thailand, which I will get to here shortly. But I just wanted to mention that there's so many other events going on when it comes to storms, like tornadoes and flooding. And there's even volcanoes all over the place that are going off right now. But we're just going to focus on mostly the one earthquake, but I will briefly mention a few of the other earthquakes. So there was a 7.3 in Tonga, which is north of New Zealand. It's east of Australia. And then there was also a 6.2 in Japan. And there was also a 6.9 along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But the one in Myanmar, seen here in the blue, was a 7.7. And that is the largest one that they've had in quite a long time. Let's see here. This one shows the aftershock. So this is the aftershock that happened just 12 minutes later. But this was along the fault line known as the, I can't pronounce it, I forget the name of the fault line, but anyway, it's a fault line that runs north and south, and the east side of the fault line actually slipped south, and the west side of the fault line actually slipped north in what's called a strike slip earthquake. Now, this is relatively, I guess, uncommon for the region. The last time they had an earthquake like this was in, I believe, the 1800s. Let's see here. Yeah, this particular earthquake, the death toll so far is at over 3,000 dead with over 3,500 injured. I have seen estimates that estimate as high as 100,000 dead with 250,000 missing. But, you know, it's hard to say what is most accurate. I think it's probably going to be somewhere in between. All right, so let's see here. This was the Saga-Ing fault line, which runs north-south the length of the country's river valley. It's densely populated and filled with unconsolidated river sediments that can actually amplify the ground shaking. And yeah, the last major event in this region was a 7.9 in 1839, also in the month of March. It ruptured about 200 miles of the fault line and killed 500 people at the time, which was very much less populated back then. And now 186 years later to the month, that same fault line broke again. All right. Mandalay is much more developed now, and the shaking was very violent, reaching an intensity value of 9 on the modified Mercalli scale. This kind of ground motion will cause heavy damage most anywhere, and several buildings throughout the area collapsed. Most of the buildings in the videos that we will show appear to either be brick, block, or soft story construction. All of these types of buildings are prone to collapse during strong ground shaking. All right, so let's see here. This is one of the things that I found. It shows like the stats as of a couple days ago. But then I want to go into some of the videos that we have here of what happened. So I'm going to show this short video that has, well, it's a 2-minute video that has some clips in it. Okay, so this is the damage that happened in Myanmar. And you can see the subway or train is rocking back and forth. And there was over 515 buildings with 80 to 100% damage and 1,500 buildings with 20 to 80% damage. And that was actually assessed by AI. There was a monastery that collapsed and killed over 200 monks. And the damage was quite extensive. And then over 10,000 buildings across central and northwest Myanmar have collapsed. And then here's another building. There was just buildings all over Myanmar had collapsed. And some of them actually are leaning. They might not have fully collapsed. And then there was temples and monasteries. And then here you can see a person standing in the opening of a leaning building. And then here is a picture of a guy who actually jumped across that bridge as it was breaking. Here's a close-up. So as that bridge is breaking apart from this guy actually jumps across, like Indiana Jones style. All right. And then here's the bridge. And you can see this bridge that's waving, and it looks to be moving at about 1 or 2 seconds. The troughs and the peaks, I guess, are about 1 or 2 seconds apart. Now, this is the building in Thailand, in Bangkok, that had collapsed, killing over 20 construction workers, and over 75 people are still missing. This is the footage that has circulated quite widely, so you may have seen this particular building. And this is the one that most of the media seems to be focused on, probably because it's in Bangkok, and it's more well known among Americans. However, Myanmar actually did suffer the great majority of the damage. Now, here's a swimming pool that shows the rolling motion of the water from back and forth. And this may be on top of a building, but the water at ground level was doing the same thing. So you can see how it's sloshing back and forth, and it takes about 1 or 2 seconds to complete a cycle. And I'll show why that's relevant here in a little bit. Okay, so now I have another video that shows that same building. This was the Office of the Auditor General building. And
you know what I thought was really surprising is how developed and how fast growing this area is. I didn't realize how modern Myanmar had become.
I'm not sure how modern Myanmar is, but yeah, Thailand is a very developed place, especially Bangkok is one of the tourist destinations in the world, like biggest tourist destinations in the world. And so I think because of tourism, at least Thailand, in the case of Thailand, it has been very built up. I do know that the population density in all of Southeast Asia is very high, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's also kind of what drives the development that also in Myanmar. Okay, so I want to show some more examples of the water that was spilling over the buildings. You may have seen these before, but as the buildings were swaying back and forth, they were pushing the water from side to side, and it was just dumping the water out of the buildings. And here's one that you can see in the pool. So there's a couple like sitting on one of those flotation mattresses or whatever that is, a big floaty thing. And as the earthquake starts to kick in, they notice and they get out of the pool. But I wanted you to notice how everything that's floating on the water does eventually get pushed over the railing and it actually falls off. So, if they had stayed on, they might have gotten pushed off of the side. And even though they got off, this giant pillow could have fallen on someone. So it's really kind of scary when you're in an urban earthquake like this, because they do say to go outdoors. However, if you're in a very dense city street like this, things are going to fall from between the buildings. And so there really is almost no safe place in a city that's this densely populated. Perhaps one of the safer places to be would be in a doorway to like an entrance of a building, because that way most of the falling debris will miss you. And if the building were to collapse, at least you're in a doorway. So that's probably what's going to offer the most protection. So I want to show some of the other buildings. These are in Mandalay, which is the city in Myanmar that was hit hardest. And you can see they were filming one building and then another building behind them collapsed on the very same street. So there you see there was one building that had collapsed. And then at the other end of the street, there was actually another building that had collapsed. And so, yeah, there was buildings collapsing all over the place in Myanmar, but especially in the city of Mandalay. I will show a graphic in a little bit that shows just how extensive the damage was in the city of Mandalay. Now, this is a Buddhist temple that actually collapsed, and that was actually also caught on camera. Like I said, there was probably at least 80% of the buildings in this city had received some type of damage. Many were completely destroyed, as you can see here from this video as they drive down the street and just look at the total destruction. And again, it looks like a bomb went off. And we've heard that in several other disasters, where it looks like a bomb went off. And whether it's an earthquake or a fire, it tends to have the same result. Okay, so now I want to show a graphic that can kind of explain why certain structures will collapse in certain earthquakes and others don't. So the shorter the period of the earthquake of less than 1 second is more likely to damage small structures like a house, whereas medium oscillations of about 1 second will destroy medium-sized buildings. But then the large buildings can withstand up to about, I guess, a 2-second oscillation, but it's whatever matches the resonant frequency of that building. And so the large tower that came down, I think it was between 20 and 37 stories. I'm not sure exactly. The one that came down in Bangkok, that one must have had a resonant frequency that kind of somewhat matched the oscillation, and that's what brought it down. Okay, so now I want to show some more of these rolling waves, actually, well, the rolling ground in general. So you can see how much these light poles are moving back and forth. The ground was actually rolling up and down and back and forth, as you can tell from these cars that are almost bouncing off of the pavement here. And then you can see the power lines bouncing around. It was quite a very violent earthquake. Also, as seen from the inside of this apartment, everything is swinging and shaking and the doors are flying open. It's very, very violent earthquake. I can't even imagine what an earthquake of this size would be like. All right, let's see. There's a little bit more clips that I want to show you. This is some of the damage inside of the collapsed buildings. And this is how they are actually finding some of the survivors, because there are pockets of space underneath which are big enough to hold a person. And so many, many survivors are still being pulled out alive. However, at this point, a lot of them are starving and they're suffering from dehydration. And there's that monastery again. And let's see, this is a very long clip, and I think we just saw this. Yeah. All right. So now I want to show something that happens during these earthquakes. So, I mentioned the soft, sandy soils that actually transmit the vibrations, but as they do so, they actually will settle into a more tightly packed formation. And as they do, they push on the groundwater, and the groundwater comes up. And this is what it looks like. So you've got, you know, water coming out of the ground everywhere that it can. You know, it's coming through the pipes, it's coming out of the cracks in the ground. And some areas are actually slightly flooded because of this, although the water isn't very deep and it is draining away. But yeah, this is called liquefaction. And this is what happens when those sandy, more loose packed soils become compressed, you know, through the shaking process, and they actually push down on the groundwater, and the groundwater comes up.
You know, I
Okay.
just thought of when I saw that an earthquake of this magnitude is causing like complete destruction, like not just what's over the ground, but what is in the ground,
Oh yeah.
right? Because that water is,
Mhm.
whatever plumbing is probably destroyed, whatever underground, you know, infrastructure
A lot of underground
probably
infrastructure and
gone.
utilities is damaged, if not destroyed. And yeah, you're gonna have water main breaks all over the place, as well as other utilities like gas. And there were gas lines that broke, and there were some fires that broke out. However, there's so many AI generated images online. Most of them are actually depicting the fires. Some of them depict the damage, and I had to filter through a lot of different videos to weed out a lot of the artificial intelligence generated content. Okay,
Mhm.
so I do want to show satellite images that show some of the movement. So you can see how it actually moved. The east side moved south and the west side moved north. And it was about 5 meters, I believe, which is over 15 feet. And you can even see this from satellite as it was shown there. Okay, so that's all of the video evidence that I have, but I do want to show some images as well. So this is a neighborhood in Mandalay, and this is before the earthquake. And all of these structures with red dots on them were damaged or destroyed. And here is an after picture of the exact same region, and it looks like a fire or a bomb of some sort hit it. So it looks like every single structure within that block had collapsed, and it's in very, very damaging. All right, so now I'm going to go to a map of Mandalay City itself, and you can see just how big of a portion of this city was damaged. So the red is destroyed and the yellow is damaged. And that's actually focused around the north side of the city is actually more densely populated, and the south side of the city is the more sparsely populated. And so the reason that most of the structures are damaged in the north is because that's where most of the structures were actually located. Okay, so now here is a picture of many, many floors of a building that seem to have been pancaked together. So this was once a very tall building, and there is now almost zero space between each floor as the supporting columns have completely collapsed out. And here is some pictures of more like apartment buildings and stuff on the left. And then there's even a temple on the right that was also destroyed. Many temples were destroyed. Um, it's really sad. You know, this is a very spiritual area. It's well known for its Buddhist monks and its temples, and much of that has actually been destroyed. So it's a really big loss to the culture and to the life and the infrastructure. All right, and then this is the airport actually at in Mandalay, and this was a before picture, and before you can see that the air traffic control tower is still intact, but it actually collapsed during the quake. And so what you see laying on the right there is what's remaining of the air traffic control tower. And then the other thing I wanted to show is what's left over after the water drains away in these liquefaction events is that you have a lot of sand and silt and mud deposits that are basically covering everything. So it's like an earthquake, a fire, and a flood all in one. All right. And that's all I have for today. So back to you, Tracy.
So, what kind of made me a new idea that kind of came to mind, if we look at this as a type of weapon or a form of retaliation, it is a very destructive, not just destructive, but like complete, complete destruction of, you know, what's above ground, what's below ground, so many lives lost. But wonder if there was some sort, like, given that it was natural, if there was some sort of foresight, like, you know, I feel like with something this big, couldn't they have detected the built up energy? I know, like, Dutch since he does, talk about, energies that are kind of building up in certain fault lines, and kind of, he gives very accurate predictions of areas that are going to get these earthquakes. And I don't know, haven't followed him too closely, but I don't know if this area was really prepared at all. Like, I know where I am in Southern California, we're constantly getting earthquake drills. We're always kind of on edge about it happening. They say we're due for a big one. They've been saying that for some time, and we probably are, but we seem to have been getting a lot of mid-sized to small ones. Maybe that's just how it's meant to be, or maybe there's something being mitigated so that they're smaller, like a bunch of smaller ones, so that the destruction isn't as bad. I don't know. That
Right.
could be.
Yeah, I actually, it is hard to follow Dutch Sense because when he does put a live on YouTube, you pretty much have to catch it live. Otherwise, it gets taken down afterwards. He did used to stream on Twitter or X, but that has also been censored. And so from what I understand, he has now moved over to Twitch pretty much exclusively when it comes to his more censored content. And so I did check it out there, and he did have a video that was in afterwards. It was after this disaster, and he was pointing out how the energy was spreading around the plate and how it was moving along the edges of the plate and was going to cause disasters in other areas. And so that 7.7 is moving out along the edges of the Pacific plate, what we call the Ring of Fire. And it is causing a lot of mid-range 6s to spread out along the edge of that. And that's probably what caused the 6.2 in Japan, as well as the 7 in Tonga as well. And so those will probably spread around the edges.
When did the one in Japan happen? Was that like in the last couple of weeks?
Let's see. This one in Japan happened yesterday, actually.
Oh, it happened after.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say there could be another or a couple more big ones to come on that fault line.
That's true. And I would recommend to go over to Twitch TV and make an account and follow Dutch Sense there, because that's where you're most likely to find his content. And he is really good at predicting not just when an earthquake will happen, but also where an earthquake will happen. Now, he's not the only one that also dabbles in earthquake prediction. During the previous week, I had also heard that there was an increased risk of earthquake activity. And that's because Suspicious Observers channel and Ben Davidson has been talking about the Earth-facing coronal hole stream, which is increasing the induction activities here geomagnetically. And so every time we do have an Earth-facing coronal hole stream impact, it affects the geomagnetic induction of the planet, and it can cause earthquakes and volcanic activity. And we actually are having an uptick in earthquakes and as well as volcanoes. And so there could be an aspect of space weather that's involved in this, but there is also, as we've seen, directed energy involved in this, and they could be working together. And I think that it's probably twofold is the reasons that we would see an uptick during this time, is because they would use such an event as a form of plausible deniability, but it also increases the amount of inductance that's going on geomagnetically, and it would probably take a little bit less energy to tip the scales, if you will. And so if there is such an earthquake machine, it would be most advantageous to use it during an event like coronal hole stream, which would increase the risk for earthquakes.
So it could be a combination of, there's a good chance it's a combination of natural occurrences with maybe a little bit of human intervention.
Right.
If you really look into this technology, it doesn't seem like there is like pinpoint accuracy. It's not like they could send one anywhere in the world. There has to be other aspects, it has to be on a fault line. It has to be, certain things going on environmentally in order for it to happen the way they would like it to.
You would think so. I mean, if you had a large earthquake that was not on a fault line, that would be very suspicious.
Right. And also, it's just compared to other aspects or other types of geoengineering, it's very recent. So I know Eric said 2011 is when they accidentally fired it up for the first time. So it's really only been around for like 14, 15 years, not a whole lot of time to practice, or
Well, in its most modern iteration, yes, I would say probably around that time. However, over 100 years, or about 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla was also producing similar effects. He had claimed to have created earthquakes, and there are some earthquakes that people claim have been associated with Nikola Tesla.
Oh, the one in New York.
The Wardenclyffe Tower, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Was rumored to have been able to cause earthquakes.
Oh, okay. It was like an upstate New York or something, right?
Yeah.
A facility. Okay, really interesting. Okay, so I think that's going to do it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and like, comment, and share this video so we can let as many people know what's really happening here. So with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.